Thank you, Speaker. I rise today on behalf of the Greens to introduce the Residential Tenancies Amendment Prohibiting No Grounds Evictions Bill 2024. And while I am very, very pleased on behalf of the Greens to bring this legislation before the Chamber, I really wish that I wasn't. I wish that I wasn't because I wish we were in a situation where the government had already introduced a year in and passed an end to no grounds evictions, which was an election commitment from them. But sadly, in the 15 months that have passed since I first introduced a bill in this place in October of 2022, we have seen little action on the ending of no grounds evictions, but lots of promises and commitments in the media and the public sphere. We have seen things change in that time though, and we must always celebrate the wins. We've seen both Labor and the Liberal National parties commit to ending no grounds evictions in the public domain. In some form, they are committed to ending no grounds evictions, and in the lead up to the state election, they were all touting their commitment to the idea of ending no grounds evictions. We have seen change in government, and we now see that the New South Wales Labor Party sit on the government benches, and that is very welcome after the end of 12 years of the coalition being in power. And we have seen the appointment of a new rental commissioner in New South Wales. But 1 year into the first term of the Minns New South Wales Labor government, and we are still yet to see any government legislation to finally end no grounds evictions in New South Wales. The bill that I brought on behalf of the Greens in October 2022 presented the then coalition government and the Labor opposition with an opportunity to finally act on advice from the Tenants' Union of New South Wales and other civil society organisations like unions, local councils and community centres, and end no grounds evictions for all tenants across the state, because people in our community know how much this lack of reform is hurting them. Sadly, this was not an opportunity seized by either of the major parties, and they were not willing to seize it at that time. The ongoing threat and the stress, as well as the harsh reality of unfair evictions, continued to negatively impact millions of renters in New South Wales as a failure for them to support that bill that the Greens introduced in October 2022. Over the past year, much and rightly has been made out of the housing crisis that has not spared any of the communities we in this place are privileged to represent. From cities to the suburbs to the regions, we know that the rental crisis is hitting hard. We have all heard stories of young people evicted from their homes simply for asking for basic maintenance like mould removal, or of older people booted out of their homes that they've lived in for years because their landlord wants to sell, or of single mothers for whom a rent rise they cannot afford is a de facto eviction notice, and they face the reality of considering living at a campsite, in a caravan park, in a car, or trying to bunk in with friends or family. Data from the New South Wales Fair Trading Office reveals that across the state, one tenant is evicted every 18 minutes. And the Tenants' Union of New South Wales eviction map tells us that in 2023, landlords made 13,011 eviction applications through NCAT, painting a very grim picture of a desperate precarity that more than 2 million renters now in this state face. And this grim picture is actually incomplete because it only reflects the evictions that go through NCAT. And we know that many evictions do not face up at NCAT, and that the actual number of evictions is likely to be a lot higher than that 13,000 number from last year. So let me repeat those damning stats. Data from Fair Trading reveals that across the state, one tenant is evicted every 18 minutes. This is not a reality that we need to continue to accept, especially when we have the support across the political spectrum to bring the threat of unfair no grounds evictions to an end. In the midst of a deeply entwined and entrenched housing and cost of living crisis, thousands of people in New South Wales are at risk of being evicted from their homes for absolutely no reason and being forced to contend with dropping vacancy rates and ever-climbing rents. This is the bleak reality, and it is why the Greens have advocated and will continue to advocate for a statewide and indeed a national end to no grounds evictions. And it is why it is unfathomable that at all of this time, and given the election promises and the cross-party support in this chamber, that we are yet to see this vital reform delivered for the people of New South Wales. There is an urgency here. Someone is evicted every 18 minutes. There are more than 2 million people renting in this state, and yet we are yet to see this reform. People can be booted out of their home for no reason, or more likely, for the reason that the landlord is simply wanting to ignore a backlog in maintenance or hike up the rent to some astronomical level. The Minns New South Wales Labor government won the election off the back of an election platform that promised to deliver fairer rental rules for the people of New South Wales, including an end to unfair no-grounds evictions. But 1 year on, the steps that they have taken to deliver on this promise have left much to be desired. To give some credit where credit is due, it is absolutely great that landlords and agents in New South Wales can no longer solicit bids on rental properties. But while this goes some way towards levelling the playing field and increasing transparency for those entering the tenancy, it does nothing to protect those already in one. It is good, absolutely a positive reform, that bonds are now portable between tenancies and properties. But being able to transfer a bond is cold comfort to people who are forced to move out of their home and evicted. Ideally, they would prefer to not have to move at all. And we know the real-world consequences for people who face the reality of the possibility of an unfair no-grounds eviction. We know and we hear time and time again stories, and every member in this place would hear them. People living in substandard rental conditions, too scared to ask for the landlord to fix the hole in the roof or the mould in the wardrobe or the broken oven or the questionable electricity socket or the dangerous gas pipe, because they are worried that if they make a complaint about maintenance, that they will receive a notice evicting them for making a big deal of a maintenance problem. And we know that landlords are itching to evict their tenants for no reason whatsoever, simply to hike up their rents astronomically, put it back on the market in the middle of a rental crisis, and profit more from the misery of millions of people throughout New South Wales. If we are serious about addressing the housing affordability and insecurity problem that is plaguing our cities, we need to listen to the experts who say that every reform to protect renters or boost housing affordability is undermined by the ongoing existence of no-grounds evictions in New South Wales. Rather than narrowing our focus just simply alone on building new supply that contains only the barest minimum of affordable housing and no public housing, or on subsidies for first home buyers, which, as ample evidence shows, only drives up the cost of housing, we need to be doing everything we can to keep people in their homes that they are already in. Ending no-grounds evictions is one way to do this. Capping and controlling rents is indeed another. But that is a conversation for another day, and I look forward to bringing that conversation on this year. For now, though, we need to follow in the footsteps of the ACT and South Australia, both who have ended no-grounds evictions for both periodic and fixed-term tenancies. I note specifically the critical element here of ending no-grounds evictions for both periodic and fixed-term tenancies. And I note a briefing that the Tenants' Union provided to many members in this place around the critical factor of this. And I quote from their briefing paper: "Reforms to ending no-grounds evictions must include fixed-term agreements. The end of a fixed-term agreement is not a genuine reason in and of itself for an eviction, with actual practice demonstrating no presumption that the commercial relationship is expected to end. If New South Wales continues to allow landlords to evict without having to provide a valid reason at the end of a fixed-term tenancy, reforms to end no-grounds evictions will be undermined and fail to deliver the greater protection and stability promised." I appreciate that there are challenges in terms of how we navigate this through the sector. I appreciate that we probably don't have consensus in this chamber about what valid reasons are and whether it should extend to fixed-term agreements. But I would urge the opposition and I would urge the government to work collectively together in the interests of the millions of renters in New South Wales to find a way through this. And I believe that there is a way through this. We also need to listen to the experts who, in a 2022 report for the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute, found that dissatisfaction with tenancy law was completely unimportant to 47% of landlords in considering whether to sell their investment properties or not. Let me just repeat that, because it's one of the things that happens more often, that actually 40% of landlords said that the tenancy laws were completely unimportant, in other words, insignificant, to whether or not they would sell their investment property or not. The same report found that dissatisfaction with tenancy law was the least important reason factoring into a landlord's decision to dispose of an investment property, with the realisation of capital gains by far the most important. So this whole argument that if we introduce good laws to protect renters, that somehow landlords will sell up and stop being investors and will lose all the rental stock just does not hold up to the scrutiny or to the facts or to the research. This is crucially important to remember in the face of the inevitable real estate and property lobby fear-mongering that rental reforms will somehow mean that the rental supply in our suburbs, in our regions and in our cities will somehow disappear and cause a mass divestment in housing. Further than this though, and even if some investors do sell up, and then we have to remember that that doesn't mean the property just disappears. If an investor sells a property, the property or the home does not disappear. It will simply go on the market again, either for a current renter to buy it and become a first home buyer, or for another investor to buy it who will then rent it out again. The sob story of the idea of poor landlords suffering under better laws that protect tenants just does not hold up when the state of the rental and housing affordability crisis is so bad. We need to be making laws to stop the woman in her 70s from being evicted for no reason and being left with no choice but to live in her car. We need to be making laws to stop the young person with a disability being evicted for no reason from an affordable and accessible rental property into homelessness because there is no alternative for him. It is these people and the millions more like them that we should be making laws for, and who finally need to see an end to unfair no grounds evictions in New South Wales. I'll now turn to the substance of this bill. Foremost, this bill amends sections 84 and 85 of the Residential Tenancies Act 2010, which currently gives landlords the right to terminate a fixed term or periodic agreement without grounds. The amended sections would instead prescribe a list of genuine grounds on which landlords could terminate a fixed term or periodic agreement, reflecting the Greens' understanding that in certain circumstances that there is a reasonable grounds for eviction. These grounds are: 1, the landlord or a person associated with the landlord intends to live in the property for more than 12 months. The landlord intends to carry out renovations or repairs that will make the property uninhabitable for a period of more than 4 weeks, and all necessary permits and approvals have been acquired. 3, the premises will be used in a way or kept in a state that it cannot be used as a residence for at least 6 months. And 4, other grounds prescribed by regulations set out by the Minister. The bill would also insert a new section 83A to define a person associated with a landlord as A, a spouse, de facto partner, child or parent of the landlord, or B, a parent of the spouse or de facto partner of the landlord, or C, another individual who, 1, normally lives with the landlord, and 2, is wholly or substantially dependent on the landlord. This definition recognises that in 2024 the composition of households and definition of family and household unit for many goes beyond direct family relationships and ties of marriage or blood. This bill will also insert new sections 85A and 85B to respectively create an offence when new landlords do not use the premises in accordance with the grounds on which the agreement was terminated, and to give tenants remedies through NCAT in situations where this occurs. The need to ensure that there is some kind of recognition of the need for creating an offence and the ability to give tenants remedies through NCAT if the reasonable ground is not adhered to is absolutely critical, because we know that it is such a huge cost and burden to tenants and renters who are forced to move time and time again, and they need to be able to be compensated if a landlord does not adhere to the reasonable reasons that are given. In the Newtown electorate office, we have heard many first-hand stories of renters being served an eviction notice because their landlord is apparently moving in or renovating their investment property, only for the home to be relisted weeks later, often at a higher price, and with no renovations having taken place. Together, sections 85A and 85B would make this an offence punishable with up to 100 penalty units, and give tenants access to remedies through NCAT, including an order for compensation payable by the landlord to the tenant for wrongful termination, or an order directing the landlord to use the premises in accordance with the grounds on which the termination order was made. These changes to the Residential Tenancies Act would go an absolutely significant and long way toward correcting the power imbalance between landlords and tenants, which has been allowed to grow unchecked for too long. It is unconscionable that no grounds evictions have continued to be permitted in New South Wales for so long. But we in this place have an opportunity to put this right and deliver this crucial reform this year, which will make a material difference to millions of renters in our communities across New South Wales. I wish to take a moment now to recognise all of the housing justice advocates who have for so long driven the movement to not only end no grounds evictions, but improve the entire landscape of renting in New South Wales. When I was elected to this place in 2015, while I was campaigning to be elected in this place, I should say, I think it was actually in 2014, I made a commitment that I wanted to see an end to no grounds evictions in New South Wales. At that stage, the scandal and response from the real estate lobby and from the government and the opposition about the crisis and the drama that it caused, and that no one would ever agree to such a thing, made a story in the Herald and absolutely inspired the 50% of renters that lived in the electorate of Newtown to join us in our campaign for renters' rights. But we didn't campaign for those years after that alone, and I recognise the incredible work of the Tenants Union of New South Wales, Better Renting, Tenants Advocacy and Advice Services, and more than 90 community organisations and unions who collaborated on the massive Make Renting Fair campaign that has seen a change in both major parties when it comes to the commitment to ending no grounds evictions. When we do finally end this and see strong protections, then it will be as a result of the tireless effort of so many experts and advocates who have been pushing for this reform for so long and saw into the future that the future would involve long-term renting and the need to provide people with a safe and secure place to call home. Finally, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues and the person who did the incredible heavy lifting on this work, Patricia, and also Ned Kutcher, who's also here today and who was working at the Tenants Union and now works for my Greens colleague, Kobe Shetty. I want to acknowledge that in our electorates of Newtown and Balmain, we see that the housing crisis is real. But sadly, one of the common things that we share with our Greens colleague in Ballina is that the housing crisis impacts her electorate just as much. We know that this is an issue across the state. It is not just an issue in Greens electorates, and we know that we must do more to see reform on renters' rights. Finally, to my colleagues in this place, I urge you to listen to the renters in your community. I know you are getting these calls. I know you are hearing these stories and you are reading these news reports. Renters are struggling with the worsening housing affordability and insecurity, and this bill will make a change. We cannot continue to wring our hands every day but take no real action as the crisis worsens. Every day, every week, every sitting session in which we fail to take action is another opportunity for people to be unfairly evicted, and that is why the Greens have brought the bill to this House today. The New South Wales Labor government need to step up and deliver on what they promised at the election, either by supporting and passing this bill to make it law or urgently moving to introduce their own. Either way, it is absolutely long past time we got this done, and I look forward to us getting it done in the coming months together. I commend the bill to the House.